NFL Live on this Thursday. Well, as one quarterback domino falls, another one still stands. We're going to discuss what's going on with this guy, Aaron Rodgers, and how long Pittsburgh can actually afford to wait on him. Also, Matt Miller's 7-round mock draft today, so we will have all the latest, especially on this guy and everybody else that is at the very top of the draft boards. And Russ is headed to the Big Apple. Yes, Russell Wilson is there. Is there room for anybody else in that quarterback room? Well, let's start there. For a second straight offseason, he signed a one-year deal with the team. Giants become his fourth team in 4 years. Wilson said he expects to be the starter. Jameis Winston also added to that roster. The Giants in possession as well of the number 3 overall pick. Here's what Russ had to say.
Yeah, I expect to be the starter and come in here and be ready to rock and roll every day. I think to be able to lead, I think this team's really looking for somebody to lead them in every way in terms of the process, in the offseason, during the season. Every NFL team nowadays have 2 to 3 quarterbacks, usually 3 nowadays. And so obviously right now we have Tommy DeVito, we have Jameis and myself, and we're just excited to get to work. But for me, it's about the process of winning. I'm focused on winning.
It's just the same old Russ, like Mr. Positive, along with Jason McCourty and Dan Graziano. We have Matt Miller and Mina Kimes. Full house today. A lot to talk to. Mina, I would love to start with you. How do you see this fit with Brian Daboll and the G-Men?
Yeah, first of all, at that price, I'm happy with it. If I'm the Giants, given the amount of guaranteed, that's not a lot for a starting quarterback. At this point, we know what the Russell Wilson offense is, right? It's not too dissimilar from what we saw in Pittsburgh, what you saw in Seattle as well. Big plays outside the numbers. It's not terribly efficient over the middle of the field. A lot of play action passing. I'll say the same thing about New York if Wilson is a starter that I said about the Steelers and something they didn't have success with. You got to be able to run the football because you want to give him those single high looks that he thrives on, throwing deep outside the numbers, the famous moon ball. But to get defenses to play single high, you have to make them respect the run. The Giants have a back that I like a lot, Tyrone Tracy Jr. I think they need to continue investing in their offensive line to be good at running the football. Maybe not in the first round, where they're picking, certainly not. But later, elsewhere in the draft, that is an area that they have to continue investing in, because they have a lot of questions along that offensive line, to say nothing of the fact that Russell Wilson does take a fair amount of sacks, so you need to do a good job protecting him.
I love what Mina's saying, and Andrew Thomas being healthy is going to help them a lot. And you look at this Giants team, and obviously Brian Daboll, she mentioned Russ and his time in Pittsburgh and what he was able to bring there. The difference is the expectation for the New York Giants is we just need a quarterback that can get us lined up, playing and play out, and get us moving in the right direction. This is an offense that ranked 31st in scoring last year and then 30th the year before. So they just need somebody at that quarterback position to the point where somebody's not flying a plane over top of the stadium late in the season asking ownership to fix a dumpster fire. And I think they moved in the right direction, getting a guy like Russell Wilson. Yes, in the press conference, Hannah, you're right. He says all the things you expect him to say, but he's a guy that's been in that position for years, understands it. And to Mina's point, throwing that ball down the field, maybe that helps unlock Slayton and also Jalen Hyatt, who's on that team, who hasn't gotten a ton of playing time.
Yeah, look, I mean, they're not as bad as the Giants have been. The cupboard's not bare. When you talk about Andrew Thomas, who's an elite left tackle, you talk about Malik Neighbors, who's a high-level #1 wide receiver, and they do like their backs, especially Tyrone Tracy. So you bring in Russell Wilson, you know what you're going to get, right? You have somebody that can operate your offense. And the issue that Russell Wilson had in Denver was going off script too much and all that, but he didn't have that issue in Pittsburgh. Like he's kind of in a point now where he feels like, I need to be minding my P's and Q's because these are my last chances we're dealing with here. From the Giants' perspective, it's a good move because at that cost, it doesn't prevent them from doing anything else. If they want to draft a quarterback at 3 or trade up to 1, they can still do that. This doesn't prevent them from doing that. Now they feel like they don't have to force it just for the sake of doing it, because they're coming off of the Daniel Jones experience of taking a guy 6th that didn't turn out to be the guy, and they don't want to be in that position again.
Right. I mean, Giants fans, this has improved exponentially, by the way, that quarterback room, all right? I know people aren't that excited, but just look at what you had before. Meanwhile, team owner Matt, he said, John Mara, the priority is to find the quarterback for the future. None of these guys really apply in that regard. So what do you see them doing in the draft?
I think all options are open for New York, and that's really the move that they made here, is to say that if somehow Shedeur Sanders is off the board at number 3 overall, okay, well, they have a guy, Russell Wilson, they have Jameis Winston, Tommy DeVito. They're ready to roll for 2025. If they love Shedeur Sanders, that's still an option for them at 3. Paying Russell Wilson $10.5 million a year is not going to prevent you from doing anything that you would view as a long-term plan for your franchise. And I think that is where this is a smart move by the Giants, who have made a lot of really bad decisions in terms of how they're building this team, whether it be doubling down on Daniel Jones or letting go of Saquon Barkley. I do think this is a step in the right direction, but to me, this doesn't say, hey, at pick 3, we're not going quarterback. Now, certainly that option is on the table now if they love Travis Hunter at wide receiver / corner, or if they love Abdul Carter, should he be there. But I really do think those 3 players, Shedeur Sanders, Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, those are the players Giants fans want to get familiar with over the next month.
Right. And so if there's any possibility of trading up to 1 to get Cam Ward, it sounds like that's dwindling. It sounds like Tennessee's leaning toward keeping that pick and making that selection. Obviously, things can change. But if you're the Giants and you don't love Shedeur Sanders, right, you're looking at 2 guys in the draft that you think of as potential franchise-altering players in Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter. If Cam Ward goes number 1, you're guaranteed to get one of those 2 guys. And it may be, from the Giants' perspective, you know, there's 7 rounds. It's not just 1. They have the 2nd pick of the 2nd round. They could use that on a quarterback. They could trade back into the 1st round if there's somebody further down the list that they like at the price, as opposed to forcing the number 3 pick on a quarterback that they're not sold on. Again, I'm not saying they're not sold on Shedeur Sanders. I'm saying if they're not, and they don't want to take him at 3, they don't have to.
But it brings up a great point to what you said. Jackson Dart could be there at the end of the 1st round. Tyler Shuck, who a lot of people are just raving about, could be there at the end of the 1st round or maybe even the 2nd round. So those are guys, and you give yourself that optionality. I still go back to the fact that the Giants are in a position of getting a Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston because of that quarterback position of what it's been like since Eli Manning left. If you look at it and you believe that Shedeur Sanders is your guy and he could be the quarterback for the next 10 to 15 years, then you go ahead and draft him at 3rd overall and you fill needs throughout the rest of the draft.
Yeah, at the very least, they have a solid bridge situation, whether that's a bridge for a young quarterback now or a bridge to next year. All right, meanwhile, who does that leave kind of as the odd team out? Yeah. Waiting on the Rodgers domino. The Steelers are still in need of a QB1, and wait, they do. Now, whoever is at the helm, the Steelers will find a new receiver there. They traded a 2nd-round pick for DK Metcalf. They signed him to a 4-year extension to pair alongside George Pickens. They bring back Mason Rudolph. So, you know, I mean, they do have a quarterback in the house. But both the guys from last year have left, as did Najee Harris in free agency. Graz, what is the Steelers side of thing as they wait and as they may continue to wait? And how long can they afford to wait?
Well, I think they feel like they can afford to wait because there's not another option out there that they feel is as good as Aaron Rodgers. Yeah. So if they wait and Aaron Rodgers makes them wait, and in the meantime someone else signs Carson Wentz, I don't think the Steelers are going to be too broken up about that because they did bring back Mason Rudolph, who was their starter at the end of the season 2 years ago, and they made the playoffs. They know he can do what they need him to do. But the preference would be to get Aaron Rodgers. If they don't get him, even if they do get him, I think the Steelers also anticipate addressing the quarterback position relatively early in the draft, be that in the 1st round or on day 2.
Mina, what would you like to see them do in the meantime? Is there a phone call, perhaps, you would like them to make?
Well, I would have liked them to see them do other things earlier. Let's start here. I don't really understand their decision-making process in all of this. They are backed into a corner with Aaron Rodgers. The only other option really who's out there, in my mind, would be trading for Kirk Cousins, but I would be uncomfortable doing that based on what we saw at the end of last season. Maybe you feel better about his ability to get under center, run play action, which would make sense with Arthur Smith as their offensive coordinator, but they're really not operating from any position of strength in terms of their options. And again, I ask, why were they not on the phone with the Seahawks about Geno Smith if all it took was a 3rd rounder? Why were they not talking to Sam Darnold, who really signed quite an affordable contract in Seattle? It's odd to me that they're at this point having clearly either decided to move on from Wilson and Fields or misjudge the market for one of them or both of them, where they don't have many options left, especially because this is a good football team. This is not a rebuilding team. They were in the playoffs last year.
I mean, you bring up a really good point because for so long we were hearing they were going to bring back Russ or Fields.